listen to 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Level B1, Oxford Reading University, Part 2. You will find Part 1 in the description and on our channel.
His wrists were cut, and he was dead. Ursula was very sad. She stopped talking to Amaranta. One day, the girl went into the kitchen, put her hand on the stove, and held it there till she smelled her own fried flesh. For days, she walked around the house with her hand in a bowl of egg whites. Over time, her burns got better, but she wore a black bandage on her injured hand for the rest of her days. 8. The war ended in May. 2 weeks before the government made the official announcement, Colonel Aureliano Buendía was taken prisoner and sentenced to death. His final request was that the execution be carried out in Macondo. As he stood by the wall, waiting to be shot, he remembered his childhood, Remedios, and the ice. Then he heard a loud shout and decided it was the final command for the firing squad. He opened his eyes in curiosity, waiting to face a storm of bullets. But instead, he saw the conservative officers standing with their hands in the air. His older brother José Arcadio was running towards them with a gun. "Don't shoot," one of the officers said. "You were sent to us by God." At the same moment, another war began. Colonel Aureliano Buendía went to free the captured liberal generals. The whole nation was caught in the storm of armed uprisings, all of them lost eventually. However, Colonel Aureliano Buendía managed to recapture Macondo. The Buendía house was filled with children. Ursula had taken in Santa Sofía de la Piedad with her daughter and twin sons. She named them Remedios, José Arcadio II, and Aureliano II. Later, the girl became the most beautiful young woman Macondo had ever seen, and people called her Remedios the Beauty. But not all the news was good. One day, José Arcadio returned home a little earlier than usual. He greeted Rebecca in the living room and went to the bedroom to change his clothes. The moment the door shut behind him, the crashing sound of a gunshot echoed through the house. A thin stream of blood flowed under the door, crossed the hall in a straight line, went out into the street, continued up and down steps, turned a corner to the right and another to the left, reached the Buendía house, went in under the door, keeping closer to the walls and trying not to stain the carpets, crossed the living room, passing under Amaranta's chair, and ran into the kitchen, where Ursula was baking bread. "Holy Mother of God!" she cried. She followed the bloody track back along its course throughout the whole town. At the end of it, she discovered that it was coming out of her older son's right ear. After the funeral, Rebecca closed the door of her house from the inside and buried herself alive. Nobody ever saw her again, and the town forgot about her. One day, Aureliano warned Ursula, "Take good care of Papa. He's going to die soon." Indeed, several days later, José Arcadio Buendía died. That day, the sky rained tiny yellow flowers. There were so many of them that they covered every roof and blocked every door in Macondo. Colonel Aureliano Buendía felt like his war was going nowhere. He kept losing his men on all fronts, and he didn't know where to lead them anymore. He was tired of fighting for empty political slogans. In the end, he completely lost his ambition. It took him 2 years to make the government offer terms of peace that were suitable for the liberals, and to persuade his comrades to accept those terms. All this time, he felt that he was betraying both his soldiers and himself. On the day he signed the peace agreement with his own hand, he locked himself in his room and decided to never think about war again. 9. Throughout the history of the Buendía family, the repetition of names had made Ursula see some strange similarities. While all the Aurelianos were lonely dreamers, all the José Arcadios were strong and impulsive men. Also, there was a tragedy at some point in their lives. However, Aureliano II and his brother José Arcadio II were almost identical in their childhood. They reflected each other's looks and actions like mirrors. Sometimes they even exchanged their identities to confuse their family or teachers at school. But at the age of 12, Aureliano II became curious about José Arcadio Buendia's alchemical laboratory. Ursula led him into the locked room where no one had entered in years. Aureliano II came there to read every day. He was excited about the books that Melquiades had brought to his great-grandfather from faraway lands. The boy really enjoyed the fascinating stories about magic lamps and flying carpets. "Is this the truth?" he asked Ursula once. "Yes," she replied. "Many years ago, the gypsies used to bring magic lamps and flying carpets to Macondo. But the world is coming to an end, and those things don't exist anymore." When he was done with the books, Aureliano II started deciphering Melquiades' manuscripts. One day, he felt that somebody was watching him. He turned around to see a gypsy man of approximately 40 years of age behind him. It was Melquiades. He looked the same as Aureliano and José Arcadio had remembered him from their childhood. "Hello," said Aureliano II politely. "Hello, young man," replied Melquiades. For several years after that, they saw each other regularly. One day, some woman on the street greeted him so warmly as if they knew each other. Her name was Captivates. Aureliano II was not surprised. Previously, he had been mistaken for his brother many times. He didn't stop her when she kissed him, nor when she led him to her bedroom. The brothers shared the woman for 2 months. All this time, she thought they were the same man. One morning, Aureliano II discovered that he was sick. Later, he saw his brother crying in the bathroom, with sweat pouring down his face. It turned out that José Arcadio II had infected Petracotes with some low-life sickness, as he called it. With the help of Pilar Ternera, the brothers got better soon. José Arcadio II never went to see the woman again. Aureliano II apologized to her and stayed with her for the rest of his life. Within several years, he had become one of the richest men in Macondo. It was all thanks to his cow's incredible fertility. He decided that Petracotes was responsible for it. He was convinced that her love was so powerful it could influence nature. Even after he married and had children, their romantic relationship continued, and his wife was well aware of it. 10. Fernanda del Carpio was born into a rich, aristocratic family. Her parents always treated her like a princess. Therefore, she had grown into a very proud young woman. From the day she married Aureliano II and entered the Buendía family, Fernanda took over the house. She turned family dinners into fancy religious ceremonies that annoyed everyone. Soon, even the silent José Arcadio II started protesting against them. But since Ursula was already 100 years old and could hardly see anything, nobody could stop the spoiled princess. Early in the marriage, Fernanda had a daughter, Renata Remedios. People called her May. Colonel Aureliano Buendia's 17 sons arrived in Macondo to celebrate the anniversary of the peace agreement. Their father was awarded a medal for his excellent service, but refused to accept it. 2 of them decided to stay in Macondo. Later, they built a railroad connection that helped the people of Macondo discover the outside world of trade and technology. Along with the impressive achievements of advanced science, the opening of the railroad attracted many curious businessmen to Macondo. They came to explore the isolated village and stayed to cultivate its rich land. They built up their own fenced city in Macondo, removed the river from where it had always been flowing, and created an enormous banana plantation there. The town was now full of strangers, giant factories, and the music of phonographs. The only person who remained completely indifferent to Macondo's great changes was Remedios the Beauty. She had become a young woman already. Still, she was innocent like a child, cheerful in her own world of simple realities.
English audiobooks, courses with your favorite movie heroes, awesome word games, and much more. The whole English classroom for your level in one place, in the Iwa app, There are thousands of English books you can read, grammar and vocabulary lessons with popular movie characters. Stop wasting your time. Go to appiwa.com right now.
Her beauty drove many men mad, and some of them even killed themselves after she had rejected them. One day, she went for a walk in the yard. She stood by the bedsheets that Fernanda had hung to dry in the sun. Suddenly, her feet separated from the ground, and she rose in the air. Slowly, she flew up to the sky, where birds sang and wonderful white flowers floated, and nobody ever saw her again. 11. Colonel Aureliano Buendía was rather disappointed with the dramatic changes in Macondo, mainly because the police forces had taken over the growing town. "We have fought those long wars so that we don't have to paint our houses blue," he said once. "I'll give my sons weapons, and they will drive the damned gringos out of our hometown forever." But before he had the time to do as he said, his 17 sons had been hunted down and murdered, all within one day. Ursula was well over 100 years old already. She had lost her eyesight long ago, but never told anyone about it. For her, it was the same as admitting her uselessness. She kept doing the domestic work same as before. After the death of his sons, Colonel Aureliano Buendía completely distanced himself from the outside world. One day, he went into the yard, pressed his forehead against the chestnut tree, and died. The family only discovered him on the next day, when Santa Sofia de la Piedad went to throw out the garbage and noticed vultures gathering together in the backyard. At the end of the mourning period for Colonel Aureliano Buendía, Amaranta surprised everyone with her sudden death. She was already an aged woman and hardly ever left the house. All she did was sit at the window with her needlework. She had been sewing a funeral shroud for Rebecca, praying to God and asking him not to let her die before her sister. Then one day, she saw Death sitting in the corner of the room. It was a calm woman in a long blue dress. She reminded Amaranta of Pilar Ternera. After that, Amaranta started sewing her own funeral shroud. One day, she asked her family whether they needed her to pass any letters from the living to the dead. At sunrise, Amaranta Buendía died, peaceful and lonely, and still a virgin. After the death of her daughter, Ursula went to her bedroom, lay on her bed, and stayed there for many years. Her family took care of her. Little Amaranta Ursula, the daughter of Arcadio Segundo and Fernanda del Carpio, often came to play with her. Meanwhile, May graduated from school and started seeing a man, Mauricio Babylonia. They met secretly every night. Whenever he was near, yellow butterflies appeared around May, and Fernanda tried to poison them with gas. The two lovers weren't very careful, and one day, Fernanda caught them kissing in the bathroom. The man managed to escape, but Fernanda hired a police officer to watch their yard at night. "I have an impression that someone is stealing my hens," she told him. The following night, Mauricio Babylonia was shot while trying to get into the bathroom where May was waiting for him. The bullet stuck in his spine, and he never got up from his bed for the rest of his life. He died of old age, tired and alone, with only his memories and his yellow butterflies to keep him company. After Mauricio Babylonia was injured, Fernanda packed her daughter's things and took her on a very long trip to her hometown. She brought her to an old church that stood on the edge of a mountain like a prison and left her there. All the while, May remained silent. She didn't say a single word until the day she died. Sometime later, a nun brought May's son, Aureliano Babylonia, to the doors of the Buendía house. Fernanda pretended that the boy had never existed. She locked him in Colonel Aureliano Buendía's room. Later, she explained to Santa Sofia de la Piedad that she had found him floating in a basket in the river. Aureliano Segundo didn't see his grandson until 3 years later, and Ursula died without even knowing he was there. 12. Around the time little Aureliano turned 1, all the plantation workers went on strike against their horrible working conditions. In response to the protest, The authorities invited 3,000 workers to an official meeting at a train station in Macondo. Jose Arcadio Segundo was among them. The station was surrounded by armed soldiers from all sides. Early on Friday morning, an officer climbed on the roof of the station and read out a special decree. It said that all strikers were the enemies of the state and allowed the soldiers to shoot them and kill them. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the officer, "you have 5 minutes to leave." People started shouting back at him. Nobody moved. "1 more minute, and we will shoot," the officer went on. "Go to hell with your 1 minute, you bastards," sounded a voice from the crowd. At that moment, a strange thing happened. The officer ordered to fire, and an immediate answer followed from the many machine guns. People started falling to the ground like dominoes. When Jose Arcadio Segundo came back to his senses, he realized that he was on a train. He looked around and saw that he was lying on a carpet of dead bodies. They were men, women, and children who had gathered at the station. With an effort, he got up, jumped off the train, and hid in the bushes. He lay there quietly and watched the train passing by. It was the longest train he had seen in his life. More than 200 cars were carrying their deadly cargo to throw it into the sea like spoiled bananas. At midnight, it rained heavily. Jose Arcadio Segundo walked in the opposite direction to that of the train and soon reached Macondo. He talked to some people on the street, but they didn't know anything about what had happened at the station. At home, he tried to talk to his brother, Aureliano Segundo, but he didn't believe the story either. The night before, he had read in a newspaper that the strikers had reached an agreement with the authorities and left the station peacefully. Jose Arcadio Segundo retired into Melquiades' old room and stayed there for years. He studied the gypsy man's strange notes and books. The less he understood about them, the more interested he became in their contents. One day, Aureliano Segundo came to the room, looking for someone to chat with until the rain stopped. But the moment he saw his brother, he knew what was happening. The man was repeating the fate of his great-grandfather, Jose Arcadio Buendía, who had gone mad because of gypsy science. "There were 3,000 of them," said Jose Arcadio Segundo helplessly. They were everyone who had come to the station. 13. The rain lasted for 4 years, 11 months, and 2 days. All of Aureliano Segundo's animals drowned in the flood, and he lost all of his fortune. Ursula looked more like a statue than a living person now. The skin on her back was covered with little shells because of all the years she had spent in bed. One Friday afternoon, the rain stopped. The world brightened up with a sun as red and hard as brick and nearly as cold as water. For the next 10 years, it did not rain again. Macondo was destroyed. The streets were flooded with the remains of broken houses, furniture, and ugly animal bones. The banana plantations had been washed away. The houses that had been built in such a hurry during the banana fever had emptied out. The strangers had left the town as wildly as they had arrived. The people of Macondo went into the streets, enjoying their first sunshine in years. Since Aureliano Segundo had lost his animals in the rain, the family could hardly make ends meet. When the rain stopped, Ursula's confused mind suddenly cleared. For the first time in years, she got up from bed. She ordered to open all the doors and windows in the house. Also, she told Fernanda del Carpio to kill the ants and the cockroaches that had nearly destroyed all the clothes in the wardrobes. On the day of Ursula's death, the wind was so hot that the birds hit against the walls and fell dead on the ground. Fernanda calculated that at the time of Ursula Iguaran's death, she was around 122 years old. Amaranta Ursula had grown into a clever, sensible young woman. Aureliano Segundo saved up his last money to send her to school in Brussels. Recently, he had been feeling very sick, as if a giant crab was tearing his throat apart from the inside. Soon it became obvious that he was dying. At the same time, His twin brother became very weak. Little Aureliano often visited him in Melquiades's magical room. One day, José Arcadio II told little Aureliano, "Remember, there were 3,000 of them, and they were all thrown into the sea." Then he fell back on the floor and died with his eyes open. At the same moment, Aureliano II took his last breath in his bed. He had lost the continuous fight with the iron claws that had been eating him alive. The drunk neighbors who carried the brothers out of the house mixed up the coffins, and they were buried in each other's graves. 14. Aureliano remained in Melquiades's room for many days. One hot afternoon, he saw the figure of an old gypsy man against the bright light of the window. It was Melquiades. "Have you discovered the language in which the notes are written?" he asked. "Sanskrit," replied Aureliano, without thinking twice. "Soon, I won't be able to come to this room anymore," the man went on. "But still, I will die peacefully. You will manage to learn Sanskrit till the notes become 100 years old. Then, they can finally be deciphered." One day, Aureliano saw Santa Sofia de la Piedad walking down the street away from the Buendía house. After 50 years of patiently looking after the family, she finally gave up on it and left. The old run-down house was being eaten away by red ants. Fernanda and Aureliano remained there together, and each of them was lonely in their own way. One day, Aureliano discovered Fernanda motionless on her bed. She had been dead for months. Then Amaranta Ursula returned from Brussels. She saw the house and exclaimed, "Oh my God, this place really needs a woman!" Without even taking a day of rest after the long journey, she started renovating the house. Soon, it breathed the atmosphere of youth and freshness again, same as during the times of the pianola. Aureliano went to the bookstore at the edge of the street, because he required more Sanskrit books to decipher the notes. He was very surprised to learn that no one in town remembered him or anyone else from the Buendía family, once the greatest family in Macondo. Pilar Ternera died on a holiday night. She was buried together with the remains of the old Macondo. Eventually, Aureliano fell in love with the energetic and cheerful Amaranta Ursula. He asked her to marry him, and the two became lovers. In that Macondo, which was forgotten even by the birds, Aureliano and Amaranta Ursula were alone, and they were the happiest people in the world. They lost their sense of time and reality. In a short time, their wild love did more damage to the house than the red ants. By the time Pilar Ternera died, they were already expecting a baby. 15. When the boy was born, Amaranta Ursula cried. He was one of the great Buendías, big and strong like the José Arcadios, with the clever open eyes of the Aurelianos. "We'll name him Aureliano," said his father, "and he'll win 32 wars." They turned him on his stomach and examined him together. The baby had a little pig's tail at the bottom of his back. After the baby's birth, Amaranta Ursula suffered an extreme blood loss and died. Lonely and heartbroken, Aureliano soon cried himself to sleep. As he opened his eyes the following morning, he remembered about the baby. When he found it, he saw a dry and empty shell of skin that all the ants in the world were carrying toward their tiny holes piece by piece. For a while, Aureliano couldn't move, not because of horror, but because he finally realized what was written in Melquiades's notes. He looked at the epigraph of the notes and read, "The first of the bloodline stands tied to a tree, and the last is being eaten by the ants." Aureliano sat down and read Melquiades's notes, because he knew that his fate was written there too. He read them without any difficulty, as if they had been written in perfect Spanish. It was the detailed history of the Buendía family, told by Melquiades 100 years ahead of time. Aureliano scanned through the notes, curious to know the mystery of his birth. He didn't notice the wind rising, warm and full of voices from the past. He was so absorbed in reading that he did not feel the second strike of wind either. It tore off the doors and the roof of the house and uprooted the trees. Macondo was already caught in a storm of dust when Aureliano began to decipher the moment he was in. Then he skipped ahead to learn how he was going to die. But before he reached the final line, he already knew it. It was predicted that Macondo would be destroyed by the wind and erased from the memory of the world. And everything that was written in the notes would never repeat itself, because families destined for 100 years of solitude didn't have a second chance on Earth.
Like this video if you like the story, and subscribe to our channel. And now here's another audiobook in English for you.